In the vast and complex world of comics, there are countless supervillains. Some of them are big and powerful, while others are small and clever. Villains are the cornerstone of any good superhero story, especially in DC Comics. DC has a reputation of creating great villains, and let's be honest, everyone knows it. The villains of DC have some sort of edge that makes them particularly interesting, and don't get me wrong, I do love the villains of Marvel. Trust me, I do. But I find that sometimes I'm a little bit underwhelmed by them. As brilliant as Magneto and Loki are, for example, I find that DC's villains grip me more. In this analysis, I want to take a look at what it is that makes DC's villains so compelling, many of which come from the Batman mythos. The villains in DC Comics have a depth that is rarely seen in other comic book villains, and here's why. First of all, and this may be kind of obvious, DC's villains are often the direct counterpart to a hero. And even though this is often the case in Marvel and other comic book universes, I think that DC takes it to a new level. Superman and Lex Luthor, for example, are both incredibly iconic, but also represent very different things. Lex Luthor hates Superman because he wants to be a beacon of hope for Earth, but can't, since Superman is already that beacon. Lex Luthor is hatred, while Superman is hope. Over time, Luthor internalized his hatred for Superman to the point where he actually wanted the Kryptonian dead. Trigon and Raven, another example, are complete opposites because Raven represents the light within darkness, and Trigon tries to exploit that for his own darkness and evil. Even though they are similar due to the fact that they're both demons, they represent contradicting things. Now we come to easily the most popular pair of archenemies, Batman and the Joker. These characters have a very complex and weirdly close relationship, but in the end, Batman represents order and justice, while the Joker represents chaos. There is no room for similarity. While searching online, including in the magical land of Reddit, I realized that the majority of the villains people like are from the Batman mythos. This makes sense, as Batman is famous for his terrifying rogues gallery. This transitions well into my next point, which is that many DC villains are generally disturbing. The reason that Batman villains are so terrifying is because Batman writers knew that their villains had to fit the theme of Batman himself. The whole idea of the Batman is that he is a vigilante that uses fear to get under the skin of his enemies. So naturally, his villains have to be terrifying in order to be a threat. Scarecrow, Deathstroke, Two-Face, all of these villains are both disturbing and gritty. It's what makes them interesting to the audience. I know for a fact that Batman villains have actually made my skin crawl while reading comics. And I'm sure that is the same for many of you. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just read The Killing Joke. Trust me. And for really terrifying villains, we feel like we are right there with the hero, being intimidated alongside them. So I guess my point here is that the gritty nature of most DC villains makes us feel frightened in real life, which is amazing. When we really look deep into why we love DC villains, there are a lot of things to consider. I've already gone over 2 reasons that the villains are great, but one important factor remains. We see many of these villains as actual people. Of course, we know that they are fictional characters, but we start to empathize with them anyway. Catwoman, the Joker, Sinestro, Harvey Dent, these are all characters that I definitely found more interesting over time. They are all still villains, but we, the audience, start to realize where it all went wrong for them. For example, Harvey Dent lost faith in the broken justice system of Gotham City, which drove him mad and eventually transformed him into Two-Face. This is a reasoning that we can understand, one that seems realistic. This is why I am not as interested in powerful, world-conquering villains, because their motivations are usually less complex. Darkseid being an exception. He's the GOAT of powerful villains. But when we are able to relate to supervillains, it makes good versus evil a more conflicting battle. Origin stories do a good job at establishing a small amount of empathy for antagonists. Mr. Freeze, Harley Quinn, the Joker, and Reverse Flash all come to mind when thinking about this. Reverse Flash once saw Barry Allen as his hero, which eventually led him on a downturn. This knowledge of the time traveler's past makes his later actions make more sense, not that they are condemned. Harley Quinn's respectful career was destroyed by her love for the Clown Prince of Crime. And of course, having been abused by the Joker, we are able to understand better why she decided to become her own person. Making a villain compelling is so important to craft a great comic book story, especially when there are so many villains out there. Over the years, DC has mastered the art of the antagonist. They've been able to make a lasting impression on the comics community through the amazing and ever-expanding Rogues Gallery. Thanks, DC, and I'm excited for your future villains. Thank you for watching this analysis. I'll see you in the next one. So for now, take care everyone.